Okay, ready to dive in. Today, we're all about semantic search. It's like search engines have gone from just reading to actually understanding, you know?
Yeah, it's a whole different ballgame now. We're talking about meaning, context, the whole shebang.
Right. And this article, the search engine's semantic algorithm arc, it's like our guidebook for this journey. So, where do we even begin with all this?
Well, it all starts with understanding how search engines evolved.
Yeah.
Think back to the early days, it was all about keywords.
Right, like just counting how many times a word appeared on a page.
Exactly.
That.
And that's where TF-IDF comes in. Imagine you're a librarian with a mountain of books.
Okay, I can picture that. Yeah, tons of books, all different topics.
So TF-IDF helps you figure out what each book is really about by looking at the words. It's like a popularity contest for words, but across all the books.
So, a word that shows up a lot in one book but is rare overall gets more importance.
You got it. Like, if we're talking pizza, the word pizza is going to stand out. But TF-IDF knows pizza isn't exactly a rare word in the world.
Makes sense, but that's just the first step, right? Because words alone don't tell the whole story.
Exactly. Context is key, and that's where things get even more interesting, and where TF-IDF starts to show its limits.
Which leads us to, shall we say, a darker time in search history. Keyword stuffing.
Yes. The Wild West of the internet. Everyone tried to game the system. Keyword density was basically TF-IDF, but just on a single page.
So instead of looking at a whole library, you're just looking at one book and seeing how many times a word pops up.
Precisely. But of course, people figured out how to manipulate that. You started seeing websites that were just crammed with keywords, even if it made the content awful to read.
Totally. It's like that friend who just keeps repeating the same word, thinking they're winning an argument or something.
You nailed it. It was clear that we needed a more sophisticated approach. Search engines needed to understand that Apple in a tech article means something different than Apple in a recipe.
Context is king. So how did we go from keyword chaos to search engines that actually get it? Our article talks about entity-based algorithms. What are those all about?
Think about how you understand language. You don't just hear words in isolation, right? It's about the relationships between them.
Right, like who's doing what, where, and why.
Exactly, and that's what entity-based algorithms try to do. They can identify things like people, places, organizations, and they use these giant knowledge graphs to understand how everything's connected.
So it's like having a super sleuth on the case, piecing together all the clues to understand the bigger picture.
You got it. This was a huge step forward. Search engines were finally starting to grasp the meaning behind our searches.
Okay, so we've gone from counting keywords to understanding entities and relationships. But then things get even wilder, right? Our article mentions this idea of embeddings, where words become, well, almost like multidimensional beings.
It's a bit like that. Imagine words as points on a map, but instead of just 2 dimensions, we have hundreds, even thousands. That's what an embedding is. Words with similar meanings end up closer together in this multidimensional space.
Okay, so like happy, joyful, ecstatic, those would all be hanging out in the same neighborhood.
Exactly, and words with opposite meanings would be miles apart. It's like creating a visual representation of language.
That's incredible. So we have all these words, these vectors, floating around in semantic space. But how do we actually use that to understand, like, a whole sentence or a paragraph?
That, my friend, is where cosine similarity struts onto the stage. And trust me, it's not as scary as it sounds. Remember that map we talked about with all those word vectors? Imagine you draw lines from the center, each one pointing to a word.
Okay, I'm picturing it, kind of like a starburst with words at the tips.
You got it. Now, cosine similarity is all about the angle between those lines. Smaller angle. Those words are tight. They're practically synonyms.
So two words could be the same distance from another word, but if they're on opposite sides of the map, their meanings are totally different.
Bingo. It's not just about being close. It's about being aligned, you know? And this, my friend, is how search engines can tell what you really mean, even if you don't use those perfect keywords.
So no more keyword cramming. We can finally write like humans again.
Well, it's a bit more nuanced than that, but you're getting the idea. Cosine similarity helps search engines see those connections, even when the words are different. Like, imagine you're researching a new topic.
Oh, yeah, like, I don't know, maybe something about how search engines work.
Perfect example. Search engines can now group together articles that explore similar ideas, even if they use different words to do it. No more feeling lost in a sea of irrelevant results.
That's amazing. So it's like, it's not about finding the one perfect article. It's about finding a whole bunch that give you all the different angles.
Precisely. It's
Yeah.
about building a deeper understanding. And it goes even further than that. What about sentiment analysis? Ever wonder how they figure out if a review is positive or negative?
Yeah, I've always wondered about that, especially when people use all sorts of creative language to express themselves, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. But remember how words with similar meanings cluster together? Well, that includes words that convey emotions. So amazing, fantastic, incredible, cosine similarity knows they're all buddies on the positive side of the map.
That's so cool. So even if a company gets 1,000 reviews with slightly different wording, they can still get a sense of the overall vibe.
You got it. And it's not just for businesses either. Imagine analyzing social media to understand public opinion, or even, this is where it gets really powerful, maybe even identifying people who might be struggling with their mental health based on the language they use online.
Wow, that's really powerful stuff. It seems like we've only scratched the surface of what's possible with all of this. But I gotta ask, Google isn't just using one of these tricks, right? It's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
You're absolutely right. Modern search engines are like master chefs. They've got a whole pantry of ingredients to work with. They blend TF-IDF, keyword density, entity recognition, embeddings, cosine similarity. It's a whole recipe for understanding language.
And of course, like any good chef, they're not giving away their secret sauce, right? But our article mentions this tool, Market Brew, that claims to analyze and reverse engineer these algorithms. It's like peeking behind the curtain.
It's a fascinating idea, for sure. And it shows that even though these algorithms seem incredibly complex, at the end of the day, they were created by humans to understand other humans.
Right. It's like this giant puzzle we're all trying to solve together. Search engines and users both trying to understand each other better. But even without knowing the exact recipe, just understanding those core ingredients like we're doing now, that gives us a huge advantage, right?
Absolutely. It's like the difference between blindly throwing spaghetti at the wall and actually knowing how to cook a delicious meal.
So knowing all of this, how should we, the listeners, think about the content we consume and create online, knowing these algorithms are working behind the scenes? What's changed? It's like we've leveled up, right? We're not just throwing keywords around anymore, hoping something
It's
sticks.
a whole new ball game. We're having a conversation with these search engines now, and they're getting smarter all the time.
So no more trying to trick the system with keyword-stuffed articles.
Nope. The more we try to outsmart the algorithms, the smarter they get. It's a two-way street. The best approach. Just create awesome content that people actually want to read.
Content that deserves to be at the top of those search results. Content that informs, that entertains, that solves a problem.
Exactly. And don't forget about context. What's really interesting is how search engines are getting better at understanding why we're searching for something. They're looking at our location, our past searches, even the time of day.
So if I search for coffee shops on a Tuesday morning, they know I'm not looking for a history lesson on coffee.
They know you want a caffeine fix, and they know you want it now. It's like having a personal assistant who can read your mind.
That Market Brew tool we talked about, it almost feels like a challenge to content creators, doesn't it? Like we've shown you how we think, now go and impress us.
It's a good reminder that at the end of the day, we're not writing for robots, we're writing for people.
Right, real people with real questions and real problems that need solving.
And the more we understand how search engines work, the better equipped we are to create content that resonates with everyone.
It's a whole new world of search out there, that's for sure. And it really makes you wonder, what's next?
Right. I mean, if search engines are already this good at understanding us, what happens when they can practically read our minds?
It's a little bit exciting and a little bit scary all at the same time. But one thing's for sure, it's going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out.
Absolutely. The future of search, it's wide open.
And on that note, I think it's time to give our listeners a well-deserved brain break. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the early days of TF-IDF to the wild world of embeddings and cosine similarity.
It's been a wild ride.
Until next time, everyone, happy searching.